Morning, everyone. My name is TAHA BENSSIBA. I am with Dell Secureworks, and I wanted this presentation today to be a little bit different, just expecting pretty much what you might have all seen and heard by now. So I designed this deck to be more around taking a perspective about what we've observed in 2020, and then using some of that and insights that we're saying to at least know what to expect in 2021. So I've named this very adequately, cybersecurity, how things will get worse before they get better. For those of you who don't know who Secureworks is, so we are what is often called a full-scale forensics cybersecurity company. That means that anything from global threat intelligence to security analytics to incident response, to security advisory services are things that generally we've been provided for the last 22 years. We're widely recognized as a global leader in these areas. And that's pretty much all I'll say about myself. You all have phones, you all have Google. You can probably figure out the rest for yourselves. Instead, I wanted to take a moment and look at some interesting statistics and numbers that probably represent what 2020 was like. From a cybersecurity standpoint, and what these tell us about what to expect in 2021. So first thing, so 2020 was by far the most profitable year for threat attackers. So they've generated, purely just in ransomware payments, threat attackers have been able to generate over $350 million worth of payment. And this was done through an analysis by Cyberchain into basically all the transactions in cryptocurrency that went to known malicious wallets, wallets that are known to be held by threat actors. This represents a 311% growth year over year. So it was really the year of ransomware payment, the year of post-intrusion ransomware, the year for cyber criminals globally. But if you forget that figure, it actually costs the global economy $3.52 trillion a year in 2020 to recover from cyber attacks. If you take all industries, if you take anything from nation states to private and public businesses, the total costs to the global economy in a way represents the same size as the third biggest economy. So we are, in 2020, we were just under the GDP of Japan. Japan's GDP in 2020 was $6 trillion. It is expected that in 2021, if we just observe a similar growth, so no increase in the velocity, that cybercrime will be, if it was a country, the third biggest economy in the world after the US and China, ahead of Japan. If you put that into perspective, all of the natural disasters that occurred around the world, so take anything from all the typhoons and everything that you've seen out there, well, cybercrime costs more per year than all of the natural disasters combined. When you try to look at that compared to other traditional crime, cybercrime today is more profitable than the global drug trade. A trade that has existed for, 4, 5, 6 decades. And the problem is that it is predicted that we're reaching about in around 2025, $10.5 trillion worth of damage and impact of cybercrime, according to Cybersecurity Ventures. On top of that, the incident remediation costs have also gone up. So the global average to recover from a breach is $3.8 million globally. In the GCC region, that number skyrockets to 6.5. So this is a study from the Poneman Institute that looked at the average cost to recover from a cyber incident. The reason why you've seen this growth is because, well, we have an increased attack surface. Pretty much no organization today is in a philosophy of reducing electronic assets or downplaying the effect of technology. Everybody's trying to see how technology can give them a business advantage, can allow them to serve the customer better, to serve the citizen better, allow them to be safer in any way, shape, or form. So we're just increasing the attack surface. And just as a natural result, this will increase vulnerability, this will increase exposure. We've got more assets at risk, and these assets that we have at risk are more valuable. I come back a couple of years, 10, 12 years, I was in the engineering document control world. We used to think that the physical version of a lot of our drawings and designs was fairly more valuable than their electronic counterparts because the electronic could always be redone. The physical ones are the ones that are considered as built and more sensitive. Fast forward 10 years, that entire philosophy has changed as well. The reason for that increase is also down to what is now called the double extortion scheme. So this was invented by a group called Maze, where they were the first ones to try to both deploy ransomware post-intrusion and then try to blackmail you by publicly shaming your organization and dumping anything they've exfiltrated publicly or reselling it. Now you have two reasons as a company who has been victim of a major cyber attack to, well, pay. You don't want your data to be lost to you. You might have some decent backups you can recover, but most of the time you do not want that data to find itself online. You do not want the entire list of your customers to show up. And a lot of organizations have been fairly good at using cyber insurance and other means to make those payments just indirectly. But it just goes on to prove that cybercrime pays. And as a result, more and more threat actors today are interested in pursuing that model than they were a few years back where cyber espionage was still in there or other means were still at large. And I think the worst part, and it was echoed by the gentleman that did that presentation a couple of minutes earlier, the skill shortage is just getting worse. The latest statistic that we have is that for approximately 2 million open positions in cybersecurity across the biggest internet job search sites, so across jobserve.uk, across LinkedIn, and across their equivalents in the US, you have 50,000 applicants competing for 2 million roles in cybersecurity. And that gap is not expected to go down because more and more people are in need of these capabilities, and that pool of expertise does not grow at the same pace. It takes 5, 10, 8 years maybe to grow a decent security analyst. It takes 12 to 13 years to build a proper incident responders. This will not change overnight, but the demand is changing year over year. Now, the other thing that we've observed in 2020 is that in a lot of the cases, compliance can be considered cybersecurity's worst best friend. And the reason for that is one statistic. On average, it has cost organizations who built their cybersecurity program just for compliance, so just to tick the box, the regulators of the government, it has on average cost them 8% higher to remediate than it costs an organization with no cybersecurity program whatsoever. The reason for that is that when you have some form of cybersecurity program, a tiny team that looks only after security, it gives you that false sense of confidence. You think, well, we have a business continuity plan, we can run that. We have a couple of playbooks for when a ransomware is detected, let's run these first. We have an incident response plan. But in reality, those plans are not rehearsed. They were poorly prepared to begin with, and they were not designed for the scale that you look at. And so the end result is that it misleads the emergency incident responders into thinking they have something to run through. They realize later on that everything they have at disposal is not adequate, and then you have to bring in third parties. So you are wasting time trying to resolve something because you've really just tried to tick the box of cybersecurity instead of trying to do this properly. And this is not new to cybersecurity, by the way. Health and safety used to be the same thing a couple of decades ago. It took a lot of major, real harm and major serious incidents to happen in the industrial sector for organization now to say, well, we need HSE represented at the highest level of management. We need a charter for HSE that is sent out to everyone in the organization, and the CEO to constantly remind their employees in the oil and gas industry, in the chemicals industry, in the nuclear, to say, stay safe, follow your HSE policies, don't take unnecessary risk, etc. So we do, as human beings, we generally do learn following one or two bad experiences. Naturally, we're not, we can try to be proactive, but we are more efficient when we react or when we have a bad episode in mind that allows us to remember us why we need to do something in a particular way. The other thing that we've learned out of 2020, and it is not a 2020 thing, I think this trend started in 2018, but that the threat actors are good at working together. They have no problem sharing objectives and then splitting the loot as well. And what we've observed was, so this dates back to 2018, but we've observed this happening more and more. So in 2018, we saw the very first collaboration with competing threat actors groups, so groups of cyber criminals who were both targeting the banking sector with banking Trojans and banking malware. We saw the first instance, so this was observed by cyber intelligence, where instances were both trick bots as well as the ICE ID Trojan, which are competitors in the cyber threat world, both work together against a single customer if they felt that it increased their chances of payouts. So it's not really a syndicate. These tend to be very tactical collaborations. So they don't seem like they collaborate on a daily basis or strategically. But it tells you one thing: while most organizations tend to run their cybersecurity programs, completely isolated from the world, threat actors have no problem collaborating if it increases their chances. And that is one trend where we've seen basically threat actors bring in tools from different players. So we'd seen Emotet into TrickBot, into Ryuk ransomware, when threat actors believe this is what will get them to reach their end results. Now, these are all what was observed in 2021 across all different organizations that monitor this. Now, what do we know already today? We're just in March, right? What do we know about what 2021 will look at? One, well, it's definitely trending to be the worst year for cybersecurity from a risk standpoint. You've all watched the news. You've probably all seen the stories with the SolarWinds hack that impacted, very reputable and famous cybersecurity organization around the world, FireEye being one of them. Approximately 10,000 US government agencies impacted. Pretty major incident, and we thought that was the worst thing we would deal with for the next 6 months. And not even 2 months later, the Exchange server incident with Hafnium, a known Asian group that is now exploiting 40 days that date back all the way to Exchange Server 2013. So imagine this, there was vulnerabilities with all the advances we've done in cybersecurity. There are still vulnerabilities that are over 9 years old that are still potentially leverageable today. The source code leaks that happen on the back of some of these attacks mean that now threat actors do have access to more code and more information about technology that is deployed everywhere, and they are more likely to be able to find more vulnerabilities to exploit. So this is all leading into one direction. 2022 was bad. 2021 will probably be worse from that perspective. The other interesting thing that we've already seen, so this was observed by both Google, the cyber threat group, as well as BlackBerry Security, the rise of the cyber mercenary. There are today 5 groups with very known advanced capabilities who are offering their services to the higher bidder. These are groups that in the past would go after organizations for profit. So their play was cyber espionage, their play was ransomware, and then extortion. These groups are now offering their services to other nations, offering them to other corporations for the purpose of saying, look, you don't have the capability, or you're too concerned to run your own cyber espionage, or we can do it for you. And guess what? These groups are not even in the same geography, meaning that it is virtually untraceable to be able to identify these attacks and map them to the actual instigators. At best, you will be able to get to the group that carried it for them. It will take miracles to be able to trace that into the actual customer who commanded these incidents. And of these 5 groups, there's at least 3 that are known to have very advanced capabilities, and that would be Costa Rica, Bahamut, and Beltrox. So these are groups that are actively monitored by governments, by cybersecurity companies, and we know from the past that these guys are very capable. And if now you can have any country in the world which previously did not have cyber warfare capabilities able to call upon them, we're going to start seeing more of the cyber espionage again, more cyber warfare, in addition to your classic ransomware, extortion, etc. Generally, they've been quite good at disguising their cyber warfare capabilities and making them look like opportunistic cybercrime. So they will deploy ransomware at the end just to make it look like they care about getting a ransom, but they will not even try to collect it. So it is quite a challenging use case to be able to deal with these situations in particular, because of that unseen collaboration in the back. And this is pretty much everything we can confidently say about 2021. Right? There's a lot of other trends. Whether they materialize or not is a different question. But what are the good guys up to is generally what people are asking this position. Well, what we've also observed statistically was that red teaming and the bug bounties do work. Pretty much all of the big tech companies, as well as a lot of major organizations, have saved in total an estimated $22 billion worth of damage for an 118 million investment. So this is, when you calculate that ROI, if you want, although ROI is probably not the right word for it, but for a spend of 118 million between all of these organizations that have called into white hat hackers to help them, that have called into bug bounty programs, they've been able to save upwards of 23,000 what their initial investment in. There are enough people who do want to help when you can reach out, when you know who to reach out to, that can help mitigate those risks. Risk zero does not exist. Probably everyone knows that. But at least you can mitigate that successfully. Microsoft is one of the organizations that really leverages the bug bounties very well. They're also one of the highest payers at the end of the day. But they have saved up significantly on a whole lot of 0 days that could have ended up being quite degrading to their tools. Air-gapped golden copy backup. So in the mindset of a threat actor, I think the best image would be your crown jewels is probably your most sensitive data. Your second crown jewels are your backups, because if they go in the mindset of extortion, allowing you to recover cancels out the vast majority of their value. And this has led to the rise of what is now called air-gapped golden copy backups, or called golden copy backups, or just air-gapped backup. And the logic behind this is, yes, you do have your standard backup for whenever you need it, but your last line of defense should be an air-gapped copy of your most sensitive information that cannot be deleted by your own administrators. And if your own administrators cannot delete it, if these solutions are designed technologically not to allow copies to be altered, well, that means attackers can also not alter these in the same way. So you still have that last resort available to you, should that be your last line of defense. The other trend that is really picking up is zero trust. It's terminology that you've probably heard. Zero trust is not new. Zero trust goes back to 2008. It was first coined by a Forrester research analyst. And the philosophy is very simple. Trust the users and the machines inside your network at the least possible way in order to prevent lateral movements. So an attacker will always try to mimic a normal user once they gain credentials. Well, if you are able to, if you do not consider anybody quote unquote authorized of having special privileges, then neither will the attacker. This is more an attempt to slow down their progress, and it is to prevent them from going in. But threat actors, work like an organization, right? They do want to monetize their investments. They do want easy targets. If they realize that they're in an environment that will cost them months before they can reach data, they will either back off or they will try to pass that on to someone who can really put in these efforts. But at least slowing them down can give you something. And the last trend that's really picking up is called XDR, sometimes also called consolidated security analytics platforms. We're not getting the benefits out of it. We don't know how to run a complex SOC platform with SIMs and SOARs and EPPs and VMSs and all that. We would rather just use the functionality. So all of these trends is kind of what the cybersecurity industry has been up to try and mitigate these. Whether this will be enough in 2021, probably not. But we know that we know what the end of the tunnel looks like. It's just a matter of getting there and at least getting to a place where everybody does have a minimum basic coverage in order to at least ensure their business continuity. And that's pretty much my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions, I'll take them. If not, I'll pass the baton to to the next gentleman who's taking over. All right, silence is wisdom. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.